Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, anyone that follows tech news could have been forgiven for spitting out their coffee earlier this week when Adobe announced plans to acquire Magento for a whopping $1.68 billion. Now, I was immediately left with so many questions about Adobe's apparent jump into that experience-driven commerce area. So I did what any tech writing podcaster would do. I asked them to come on the podcast to tell us all about the announcement and give the listeners in 165 countries to this show a few more answers behind the headlines on those conspiracy theories that many of you may have read. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way back to San Francisco so we can speak with Errol Denger, Director of the Experience-Driven Commerce Program and Strategy at Adobe. And he's going to give us an overview of exactly what this acquisition will mean for consumers, for businesses, and indeed for Adobe and Magento. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Errol. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi, good morning, Neil, and thanks for having me this morning. Let me just start. I guess you can say I'm an e-commerce geek at heart. I actually started my career, opened my first web store in the 90s, joined Intershop in 99. I don't know if you remember back in the days of Pets.com with sock puppets and Webband.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I'd say Webband was about 15 years too early. So after that, I worked at IBM for about 15 years and, really watched the e-commerce industry mature. So it became a web store and evolved into an integral part of every business model. And so more recently, I've been at Adobe for about the past 3 years, and I have two jobs here. Director of Strategy. So the primary thing that I've worked on is the Magento acquisition. But my team and I also oversee the Experience-Driven Commerce Program. So we develop all of the commerce capabilities, alliances, and go-to-market that enables Adobe Experience Cloud to support e-commerce scenarios. So it's a pretty broad role and definitely an exciting time for Adobe.
I'm really glad you mentioned the Magento acquisition there because Adobe has dominated headlines all week this week when it announced plans to acquire Magento for $1.68 billion, I believe. And my understanding is that Magento is an industry-leading commerce platform with more than 300,000 developers. So I instantly thought Adobe's entering the world of e-commerce and wants to make every experience shoppable. But can you set the scene and offer the listeners a little background on how you see Magento at Adobe and also what made it such an attractive acquisition?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's start by setting some context. So as we've been working with the experience-driven commerce clients, what it really showed us is how broad this space is. So we literally have companies like TGI Fridays doing online ordering, dynamic digital goods firms, industrial manufacturers, all the way through to IoT plays like Carnival Cruises Medallion Program. So a very broad range of industries. And at the same time, we saw this crossover between B2B and B2C. And I guess the third trend was that we're seeing an increasingly sophisticated SMB and mid-market motion. So when you start analyzing the industry, it's actually a $9 billion TAM, which is total addressable market. And, in order to participate, number one, in the broadest TAM possible, but more importantly, to support the kind of experiences and clients that Adobe has, it became pretty obvious who should be on the short list. So we were looking for a company that can support all of these different scenarios and had the flexibility to be molded from, literally online food ordering all the way through B2B and B2C. So that was really the underlying deal context of what we were looking for and why we purchased Magento.
Now, I was fortunate to attend both Adobe Summits in London and Vegas this year, and the message on both sides of the Atlantic was pretty clear, and it's that people are buying experiences rather than products, and that the customer relationship is equally as, if not more important than the transaction itself. So can you help people listening understand how this acquisition will help Adobe continue on that same theme of experiences and how you ultimately envision it working together in the future? I mean, are there any particular scenarios that you envision there?
First of all, this is definitely the part that excites me because now the fun part starts. So, I would say if you think about it first, great experiences aren't just about high fidelity sites and mind-blowing creative. There are those too. But from a commerce perspective, some of the best experiences are those you never even realized happened. So maybe, automatically when you buy an airline ticket, you're put in an aisle or a window. You walk into a store, the sales associate knows your name or your size, or maybe it's the support site that's so intuitive that you didn't have to call the call center to activate a product, change a warranty, or use the product. So from our perspective, great experiences really understand your context and they eliminate friction and help you solve problems. So, as you mentioned, it's about making every moment shoppable. So the first set of scenarios are obviously to bring commerce more into that point of consideration. So think about things like shoppable ad units, shoppable email campaigns, all the way through to that reordering process and even creative. So, we want to really create a very contextual and frictionless experience that aligns Adobe's mantra. But the other thing you might have seen when you were at Summit was the sneak that Martin Bjerge showed. Did you have a chance to see that one?
Which one was that? Was that in Vegas or London?
In Vegas.
Vegas.
With the pants.
Yes, of course I did, yes. And it was the lady from Saturday Night Live, wasn't it, there?
Exactly. Who can forget? But, what Martin showed, I think, is a great example of what we're trying to achieve. And so for the listeners, if you missed it, what we showed was how you can use Adobe Experience Manager and actually our new commerce microservices to make any creative or any image or video shoppable. So literally think about what the power of this solution could be. If maybe you're a media property, instead of just having to sell clicks, you're now able to sell conversions. So that story about the snowboarding, epic snowboarding journey, or that snowboard review, you can literally just click that board and buy it right there. Or if you think about, the social advocate who has a blog site, and instead of, again, just kind of creating a following, right on that site as they're preparing imagery, et cetera, they can make every element of that experience shoppable. So, there's a whole range of new business models that we want to explore. And, that sneak just was a little bit of a window into the future. We knew where we were going at that time. So we thought it would be a fun way to really start setting that vision of what the possible is and how we want to transform this space.
So for me, from the outside looking in many ways, it feels like this is the final piece of the jigsaw for Adobe that will enable you to fill that gap in the Marketing Cloud ecosystem by adding an e-commerce solution into that Experience Cloud platform. Is there genuine excitement over at Adobe at what opportunities this can open up for you? Because it's a completely new direction, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd say the excitement is palpable. But, the thing about e-commerce is everyone is an online shopper. And it was just so cool that after we executed the acquisition, first of all, everyone was supportive, but everyone has an opinion. Everyone, is full of great ideas. So to your question, it's definitely filling a critical gap in the portfolio. I haven't seen this company this excited and ready to rally for some time. So it's definitely filling a key area. I wouldn't say we're done. I think industries and the market will continue to evolve, and there are a lot of really interesting disruptors out there. But for now, this is a very exciting piece for all of us.
Essentially, I see two good products joining forces to help grab hold of that e-commerce industry. And Brad Rencher, Adobe's Executive Vice President for Digital Experiences, who also has more shoes than Imelda DeMarcos, I've been led to believe, but that's a different story. He said this week that Adobe is the only company with leadership content creation, marketing, advertising, analytics, and now commerce, enabling real-time experiences across the entire customer journey. I mean, is that something you can expand on? Because it is true, isn't it?
Well, that's definitely the vision that we're striving for. Yeah. So, again, I think I covered that a moment ago, that, we don't look at e-commerce as just the cart and the clothes. Well, first of all, of course, with Magento, we also get great order management. So it's not just about the buy button, but following all the way through. But, when you really think about it, as you just articulated, we're really trying to close the loop here. And that's another element then, or dimension of the value prop. So it's the experience and content, but it's also that data-driven element. So Magento brings Magento Business Insights, their analytics tool. And if you think about what this really means is, being able to understand, and let's just give you a quick scenario. Say you're a merchant and one of your products has started to decelerate, meaning it's stacking up in the back room. The old approach is you start marking it down. But if you think about a more data-driven approach, what this merchant can now do is let's identify the cohort that actually was buying this product. Let's look for more people like that specific audience. Again, with Adobe's DMP, let's target them, let's run a special campaign. And now instead of marking, going through that tiered discounting model for merchandise, now you're actually going to modify your marketing and business tactics to optimize margins. And so if you think about that element, it really becomes even more obvious why Adobe, which is, we have the industry's best experiential web and customer analytics with Adobe Analytics. Magento brings a really rich business insight capabilities. So I guess I would go so far as to start calling this a modern trading platform. And so as you look at different areas of your assortment, you can actually optimize the optimal trading strategies. So you start thinking about things like, how do I, increase AOV? And you take things like cost of goods sold, cost of marketing, merchandising to really improve your business outcomes. So I think that, when Brad talks about this end-to-end value prop, it's really not just the advertising and experience, but it's that analytics and how that all comes together.
So with PayPal acquiring iZettle and now Adobe acquiring Magento, do you think we're going to continue to see consolidation in commerce?
Yeah, we're at an interesting point. I'd say at a high level, we're at the third phase of e-commerce. And, the market's now about 20 to 25 years old. I guess the first commercial sites were launched broadly in 95, I'd say, with LL Bean and the Olympic sites, et cetera. And so as you look at this next phase, I think the number one most prevalent trend is kind of this ubiquity of e-commerce and omni-channel really becoming not just a buzzword, but a reality of how we shop. And so with that, I think you're going to see a lot of new entrants trying to figure out how they support this space. And specifically what I'm referring to is if you look at all of the store solution or store system providers like point of sale platforms, they're no longer a silo. And what they're trying to figure out is maybe how they play a more important role in the retailer's ecosystem. And of course, there are other entrants, but as we looked across the space, I think that there's some really interesting disruptors. They're still early in their journey, but I would definitely expect as they mature and achieve scale that you are going to see continued, acquisitions. And, some of those firms are also our partners, and we work with them very closely. But if you look at companies like Commerce Tools, Scava, New Store, Elastic Path, et cetera, as independent entities, they're doing well. But I can imagine a lot of these other larger firms also have their eyes on them. So it's going to be a continuously transforming landscape, I think, for the near term and long term.
So one of the biggest appeals of Magento was that it was open source. So a question I've got to ask is, will Adobe keep it open source, or is it too early for those kind of conversations?
Have you ever heard of the PDF?
Good point.
So, on a more serious note, Adobe's a huge contributor to open source. We have currently over 250 active projects. So everything from brackets and PhoneGap to Jackrabbit and CMS. So it definitely is maybe a less well-known part of our heritage and DNA. So, we definitely not only want to keep the open source element, but that's probably one of the things that excites us most about this acquisition. And, maybe I could share a story that makes this really come to life. So when we were at their sales and partner kickoff earlier this year, they were talking about the Amazon one-click purchase patent. And within 24 hours of that patent having expired, a member of their community had created or developed instant purchase, which is basically a single click to buy. And what's even more interesting than the fact that this firm actually developed it, but literally within 24 hours, it had been distributed across hundreds and actually thousands of developers and became ubiquitous almost overnight. And if you think about that story, I mean, the pace of e-commerce innovation is just so rapid these days, whether you look at conversational commerce with chat, voice, all of these different IoT platforms, et cetera. And what we really want to rely on is, our community and the Magento community. I mean, these are brilliant folks. They're full of great ideas, and we really want to partner. And it's a vibrant community already. They provide 25% of Magento's code. They're working on a number of really exciting core projects like the one I mentioned. So we actually want to grow that percentage. And I'm definitely excited about it. And if you read Matt Assay's tweets, he oversees our development organization. You'll see how excited we as a company really are about that open source element.
So when are you expecting to complete the acquisition? And assuming everything does go to plan, do you have any timelines for when Adobe customers will start to reap the benefits of this partnership?
So the regulatory approval process can last about 6 to 8 weeks. So, at this point, I'm unable to provide a firm number, but I'll say we're already rolling up our sleeves and working through this. But even before we acquired Magento, announced definitive agreement to acquire, have to ensure that my terminology is accurate. We had an existing integration. So we have a couple dozen clients that use the Commerce Integration Framework to integrate Magento with Adobe Experience Manager. And, later this year, we'll have additional announcements then coming pretty quickly. But directly to your question, customers can start taking advantage of the work that we've already delivered as early as today. And we're happy to work with them and, sit down and share what we've done.
So how do you see the future of experience-driven business? I mean, how do you see Adobe continuing to evolve with that as well over the next few years?
Well, when I look at the future, I always feel like let's start by looking at the past and present to start understanding what the future has in store. And so with that, I guess what we're seeing out there today is, obviously, customers are more demanding than ever. They're shopping across channels. And incidentally, from a commerce perspective, what you see are that surpluses are almost ubiquitous. So there's no such thing as a unique assortment anymore. In fact, there's a Harvard Business Review quote that I am fascinated by, and that is that 97.8% of the value of innovation goes to imitators. So to summarize it, if you have a great product, it will be, or feature, it will be copied. But the thing that really is a durable strategic advantage, first of all, is the experience. And second of all, is that ability to continuously and rapidly innovate. So I think Shantanu has really painted a clear vision of where he's taking the company, right? Yeah. So experiences will become more contextual, more personal. We'll continue to invest in Sensei. And as you saw, the experience system of record is a critical element of our journey. So on this experience part, making them more contextual, more engaging, I think the path and the vision there is pretty clear. I think the other thing, and just talking about the future, is, the future of how firms compete is going to be really based on this agility, flexibility, and, not taking 18 to 24 months to launch their commerce platform, for example. And, that was one of the key decision elements behind Magento. They can stand up their average site in about 3 to 6 months. And that includes everything from pulling together the creative, the wireframes, the designs, the integrations. They have sites that they get up much faster than that even. But, what we think the future is going to be, great experiences, supported by really unparalleled agility. So what you're going to see is, for example, with Adobe Experience Manager, where business leaders can run every element of the experience. With Magento, you have this business cockpit, but we're going to continue to invest in these capabilities that make companies more agile. So one area that I think is an interesting recent trend is this pendulum has swung to what we call progressive web apps and single page apps. So that's using maybe React and Angular to develop mobile and digital experiences that almost operate like a native application. So a good example of, say, a progressive web app is your Gmail account, right? It feels like you're in an application, but you're in a browser. The problem with that is that, it has completely swung over to IT. And, so now you're once again custom coding your pages. And, I think we believe that the pendulum is going to swing back, or let's just say we're going to catch up. And so we have things like the SPA editor coming, which is the single page app editor. Magento has a PWA studio, Progressive Web App Studio. But what we're doing now is we're enabling business users to now control and create all of even the richest experiences. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but, the future is about flexibility and agility and experiences. And, those are the areas that we're going to invest in. Our aspiration is not only being fast and agile, but putting that control into the business's hands. So like we said earlier, when they pick up a trend, such as, inventory decelerating in a specific category, they can take all of the necessary steps, like spinning up a microsite, making an experience transactional, responding to a competitive threat, and really succeeding in this, I'll say, at internet speed. So, that's where we see it going. It may be not as exciting as, all of the chat and conversational and other elements, but, we feel those are a given. We will support conversational commerce, et cetera, but it's how you do it that's important. It's not about, going and saying, go get 50 developers to do it. It's about empowering your marketers and your business leaders to support those initiatives so that companies can essentially innovate rapidly, iteratively, and at scale. So that's where we're moving this for sure.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a huge week for Adobe, and I'm sure you've had to do hundreds of interviews speaking to people like myself, so I really do appreciate you taking the time there. But before I do let you go, could I ask that you remind the listeners of where they can stay up to date with the acquisition, and equally if there are any Adobe customers listening that they're excited? Do you have any contact details for a team member, or if anyone has any questions about our conversation today, just so they've got somebody they can reach out to or a department?
Yeah, definitely. So I would recommend going to the Adobe blog, as well as the Magento blog for all of the latest news. So, we're going to continue to provide input to the market that way, as well as through more traditional channels. And for those of you that know me, I am a complete, as I mentioned, e-commerce geek. I love this stuff. So if you want to continue the conversation, my email is my last name, which is Denger, DENGER, @adobe.com. And, my team and I are happy to share what we've done and, really look at how this might be a fit for your company, or again, answer any questions. And, the one thing I forgot to mention as well, when I was just thinking about my team, and is that we are also going to continue to support all of our clients' existing investments in other commerce platforms. So like I said, being open is a key principle. So if you are an existing Adobe customer and you've made an investment in another platform, don't worry. We're going to continue to support the program, and we're happy if you want to reach out to us to answer any questions you have there as well.
Excellent. Well, a huge thank you for coming on today and sharing Adobe's vision. I love the fact that the future is going to be more contextual, more personal, more engaging, and with the future being experience-driven business. I also love the point that you highlighted there, that businesses are going to need to be much more agile and much more flexible to survive and keep up. So many talking points there, but I really do thank you for taking the time to come on today. So thank you.
My pleasure, Neil. It was great to be here this morning, and thank you.
I'm so glad that I had a chance to speak with Errol today. I think all too often as a tech guy, and maybe a few of you listening are the same, we spend far too much time reading cynical analysis and untruths. Some may like to paint Adobe as the big tech behemoth that wants to stop Magento from being open sourced. But here's the thing, very often a very quick conversation can clear that up straight away. And that's exactly what happened with Errol today. And it's got me thinking, how many rumours and conspiracy theories do we soak up online that could all be cleared up with a quick conversation? Much like in offices where people email the guy next to them rather than just have a little conversation with them. And things like email, text, websites, forums, messaging apps, there is no intonation, and it's very difficult to find out exactly what's happening. I love my tech, but what I'm saying is we shouldn't underestimate the value of a good old chat. So I'm glad we put the chat amongst the pigeons, Alan Partridge style, today. I also loved Errol's initial response to the open source questions, where he said, "Have you heard of PDF?" But what are your thoughts on the big announcement this week? Do you have any insights to share or questions that you would like answering? As always, my door is always open. You can tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, and you can email me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. So as always, a huge thank you to each and every one of you for listening and tuning into the show, and also for Adobe for taking that time to come and sit down and answer my probing questions. So have a great weekend, work hard, stay humble, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.